This conference will now be recorded.
In this section, we are going to discuss about advanced parameter handling. So let's first understand what parameter is. This parameter word basically consists of any name and value pair which are part of your applications. These parameters can appear either in the query string or maybe in a post data of HTTP request. And these are basically various inputs which are given to the web app. And as these are part of your web applications, these parameters can also be vulnerable to tampering. Parameters can be basically categorized into two main groups based on how they represent data inputs to your application. So either it can be a user input or it can be with application preset value. So when I say user input, it means that it can be like free form data fields wherein the user enters the data. So in some applications, you might have seen a comment section or maybe somewhere where you enter your name, you enter your phone numbers on online forms. So these are various examples of your user input parameters. And applications with preset data is wherein the parameter value can only be from one of the preset values which have been defined in your application. So if your application says that for this parameter, let's say pay, it can have values from pay 1, pay 2, and pay 3. So from a user perspective, you can only choose any of these three values. These are, if these are fixed, they are called as static parameters. Example would be like a month or a year. And then similar to this, we have dynamic parameters. Dynamic parameters have values which can change based on the application processing. Example could be a session ID. So the most common inputs to your application are like in some part of your application, you might find the drop down list, some checkboxes, some radio buttons, some action buttons, or it can be various hidden fields as well. So ASM helps you protect against the parameter values which are embedded in these various parts of your application. So when it comes to static parameters, are these are the parameters whose possible values are a known set of pre-calculated values defined by the application. So these can be from a specific user list. If I consider our application which we have been dealing with, let's say if I choose the credit card type, it can be MasterCard, it can be Visa, it can be maybe American Express, or any predefined values. So ASM basically maps these static parameters values one time. So each time a new parameter value is detected, that has to be added to the security policy as one of the possible values. So whenever input is given to ASM, the ASM subjects the user input data through several types of security processing. It might check like string length restrictions, which can protect against cross-site scripting and buffer overflow attacks, or maybe character set strings, character set restriction, which also can help us block cross-site scripting or SQL injection attacks. And it can also check any patterns which are matching any common attack signatures. The user input parameters are categorized into different types based on the input value types. It can be first as alphanumeric. So the parameter value can have letters, integers, and underscore character in it. And for this data type, you can specify what should be the maximum length. You can define what are the acceptable parameter values. Then next data type would be decimal user input parameter. So this specifies that the parameter value is in decimal format. Values for this data type can only include numbers along with the decimals. And again, for this data type also, you can define what should be the maximum length, what should be the maximum value. And then you have email user input. So the email data type specifies that the parameter values is in the email address format. So values for this data type can include like numbers, letters, and meta character at the period dot character, hyphen character. And then you have integer user input. This specifies that the parameter value is numeric and it can include only the whole numbers. And again, with respect to this parameter data type, also you can specify what is the minimum value, what is the maximum value, what is the maximum length. And then you have phone user input parameter. This value, this parameter value is in the phone number format. Next is your file upload parameter data type. This data type specifies that there is no text limit for the data. It only checks the length. So ASM can detect and block users maybe from uploading binary executable content in the parameters value. You can have specific regular expressions defined. So with respect to your application, what kind of parameter is being used, what is the exact data type, and with respect to that data type, you can apply restrictions. So let's go ahead and perform one of the lab where we are protecting our static parameters. So in here, I'll just go ahead with first creating a security policy. I'll give it a name. From the template, I'll choose it as a fundamental template. I'll go to advanced mode and set the application language as Unicode, and then go ahead with policy creation. So now that I have created my security policy, I will assign the security policy to my virtual server, and also ensure that I'm logging all requests. So once I have updated my security policy to the virtual server, then let me go ahead to my policy settings, and I'll change the learning mode from automatic to manual. Then with respect to, let me just save this first. And with respect to parameters, which we are performing lab, I'll change the learning method to always for parameters. So we want to add an explicit parameter to this policy and then modify its type. So after this, we'll just save this and again apply the policy. So after I have changed these basic settings, let me go ahead and first of all clear my event logs as well as any learning suggestions. Okay, there are no learning suggestions, that's fine. So let me go ahead accessing my application. and complete a selling an item procedure. And submit this request. So once I complete this process, let me again go back to my F5 and refresh the traffic learning page. So in here, I'll see various suggestions with respect to parameters. If I try to see, I'll get illegal parameters, various parameters which have been identified in my request. So let me select the parameter payment, illegal parameter payment, and accept this suggestion. So after accepting this suggestion, if I go to the security, application security, parameter list, you will see that a parameter called as payment has been added in my parameter list. So if I click on this, I'll see that at present for this payment parameter, the parameter value type is user input value. So let's allow only certain payment methods. Let's modify this payment parameter so that it can have only the values which we define. So I'll change this input parameter value type to static content value. And in here, I will add only those parameter value types which should be allowed as per my application design. So let me again go back to my application, and once you click on sell an item, you will see the various options. So with respect to payment, these are the various options. So you would have to set the values exactly the same way. Let us just choose, let's say checks. You just copy check from here and paste it here. Click on add, money order, add, PayPal add, add. So I've added all these four values to my security policy. Let me just leave this wire transfer. I'm not going to add that as a value, and I'll just update. After updating this to static content value, I'll apply the policy. And now I'll go back to my application page and I'll complete this selling an item procedure once again with the wire transfer as a input, which I have not defined in my security policy. I'll select this specific option and then just submit this query. So I see that even when I selected wire transfer as one of the values to my parameter name, which is called as payment, I'm still able to submit this. So, wherein ideally the request should have been blocked. So let us again go back to our policy and check the learning and blocking settings. And with respect to parameters, I need to ensure that the illegal static parameter value should have the block flag enabled. Since my policy is in blocking mode, I also need to ensure that that specific violation has a block flag enabled. Only then my actual request, which is violating the policy, will get blocked. So let me just enable this and then click on save and apply the policy. I'll ensure one more time that I have enabled illegal static parameter value. Okay. Now let me again go back to my application and repeat the same procedure. Select wire transfer and then submit this query. The moment I submit it, I see that my request gets blocked. So with this, we complete the protection against our static parameter.